Hey, Beavis, I'll buy one of your candy bars for $1.
No way. They're $2, butthole.
Then can you, loan me $1?
Hey guys, Ralph here from the Endgame Investor, and today we're going to talk about all central banks all over the world losing money and going bankrupt. Not just the Fed, but the ECB, all the little mini central banks in Europe, the Bank of Israel, and the only one that isn't yet is the Bank of Japan. But that's because they haven't raised interest rates yet, but we have a number on how much they will lose when they have to, because the yen is dying. But first, let's explain what that means when a central bank is losing money. How can a money printer lose money? And what does that mean practically? Well, if you take several steps back and think about what finance really is, finance is merely a representation of resources available in physical reality by representing those resources in a unit of account. The financial system creates prices for different resources depending on how much of those resources exist and how much people want of those resources. And those units of account divide goods and services among the planet so that everyone knows where they fit in to the division of labor and people don't eat each other's brains in a zombie apocalypse where nobody knows what they're supposed to be doing. And so they just go crazy and take what they need to survive by any means possible. Instead of a zombie apocalypse, we have a division of labor, which is entirely dependent on the unit of financial account, which keeps track of the goods and services on this planet available to consume and needed to be produced. Units of account cannot come out of nothing. They have to be based on some reality, some pre-existing reality that already exists. Because in order to determine how much goods and services exist on the planet, you need everyone on the planet who's producing goods and services to be able to account for what they can produce and what they need to consume. And the only way they can do that is by agreeing on a general unit of account. You cannot have that come from fiat from above, because if it comes from fiat, by definition, it's one party dictating how much goods and services people have to produce and people need to consume. But that is impossible to dictate because one party never knows how much resources any given party has or needs or wants or can produce. And so the unit of account needs to be agreed upon organically, naturally, so that people trade for what they need and exchange what they have by using this unit of account. And originally, when global trade started to become a serious thing, people used gold and silver. Those are the units of account, and they still are. Why? Because the current currencies that exist in the world that divide today's goods and services to create a division of labor and a price system, they are substitutes for the original units of account, gold and silver. The institutions that issue these currency units of account that stand in for gold and silver, they have a neat trick that enables them to siphon off real goods and services to their buddies in the government that created them. That is, create more units of account and spend them into the economy, and that redirects the flow of goods and services to the central banks and to their partners in the government, where the governments get bigger and bigger at the expense of the public, which is called the process of inflation.
Let me have some, come on.
No way. I'll sell you one for $2.
Okay.
Through the process of inflation, the general unit of account must stay to a degree rational. In order to maintain a semblance of rationality in the unit of account issued by central banks, they pay interest on those units of account in the units of account that they create, which enables the entire system to contain an internal rational sense of prices that keeps the world producing. However, when these central banks, when these currency creators start to lose money, they have to make up for that loss by printing more money and handing it to the people that they owe the money to through the mechanisms of interest that keep their currency system having a sort of semblance of rationality to it. When a central bank loses money, it's the currency itself that gets hit, and therefore everyone who uses it gets poorer. You can understand this a lot more simply by way of analogy. Imagine a bank, not a central bank, just a bank. When people were using gold and silver as money, a bank says, give me your gold and I will give you receipts and you won't have to carry the gold anymore. So they do, and the bank has a whole bunch of gold, and the people now have a whole bunch of receipts and start trading these receipts around at par with gold, and the price system remains stable. But then the bank takes the gold and spends it on a whole bunch of Ferraris, whatever. And then the bank has nothing left, and people figure this out and start redeeming its receipts for whatever gold it has left on its balance sheet. But people find out that it doesn't have any, and so the value of its receipts go to zero, and everyone who uses them ends up with nothing. Central bank in this case, the one that took the gold and issued the receipts, had a unit of liability, those receipts, which was its currency, and now that currency is worthless because all the money that was backing it has been spent. That is the same thing as a central bank going bankrupt and losing its capital position. It is the currency, it is its unit of liability that gets hit, and therefore everyone that uses it as a substitute for actual money. The first central bank that we're going to look at, the central banks of Europe. This is from the FT. Eurozone central bank losses risk bailouts and more political pressure. As rates rise, about $70 billion euros of interest on the deposits of commercial banks will need to be paid next year. When a company tells its shareholders it expects to make 9 billion euros of losses over the next 5 years that will more than wipe out all its provisions in equity, it would usually trigger an existential crisis. The normal rules do not appear to apply to the Belgian central bank. And here is the FT trying to convince us that none of this actually matters. It doesn't matter in economic terms because a central bank can function just fine with less capital, indeed even with negative capital, said Eric Nielsen, chief economic advisor to Italian bank Unicredit. Central banks are magical happy places where accounting doesn't matter, the currency is magic, and nothing adds up to anything.
Oh, look at me. I'm making people happy. I'm the magical man from Happy Land in a gumdrop house on Lollipop Lane.
Except that isn't true. The bank may be able to carry on its business in nominal terms by passing around monopoly money that has no value, which is fine. They can play a giant monopoly game. And here we have the Bank of Australia. The Reserve Bank of Australia recently announced a 37 Australian dollar, 25 billion American dollar accounting loss on its pandemic bond purchase program, leaving it with a negative equity position of 12 billion Australian dollars.
Hey, Butter, you should try one of these. I got peanuts. It's really good.
Oh, yeah? Cool.
The UK's Office for Budget Responsibility estimated the Bank of England would need to be paid £133 billion by the government over the next 5 years to cover losses on its quantitative easing portfolio.
Hey, Beavis, want to buy a candy bar from me?
Okay.
Where does the central bank get this money? It gets it from the government, but where does the government get the money? Either it gets it from taxpayers or it gets it from the central bank by the central bank buying its bonds. So either the government takes the money from the people, making them poor, paying back the central bank, which is losing money and needs a bailout, or the central bank prints up the money, hands it to the government hands it back the money to the central bank.
Can you, loan me $1?
No way, because then you'll have, $2 and I, won't have any.
Come on, Beavis. I'll buy one from you.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
What about Japan? Japan weighs $1.1 trillion bond risk for banks if Bank of Japan pivots. Trust in a central bank is trust in its money substitutes, just like trust in any old bank in the 17th century was trust that its substitutes could be redeemed for the gold and silver deposited there. Ultimately, all currency rests on the value of gold and silver that it is exchangeable for. Otherwise, the currency is worthless. There are only two paths to go from here, and they both lead to the end game. One path is that central banks continue to raise interest rates, lose money on their portfolios, print money to cover those losses, thereby causing their currencies, their money substitutes, to die.
I'm worried about blank.
Don't you worry about blank. Let me worry about blank.
Good.
Fry, we're worried about Planet Express.
Don't you worry about Planet Express. Let me worry about blank.
Or central banks reverse course, lower interest rates yet again, improve their equity positions, but the public dumps the currency anyway because printing in the midst of price inflation that is still raging is going to destroy whatever confidence is left in the money substitute in the first place. So there is no escape from here. It just depends which path to hell currencies and their central bank overlords want to take from here. But the path is not a long one, whichever direction they decide to go. This is Rafi of the Endgame Investor. If you enjoyed this video, you can sign up for a 2-week free trial of the Endgame Investor, where central banks are a hot topic indeed, or you can become my patron on Patreon. You'll get weekly biblical commentary on economic and monetary policy topics. This week, we did something special. I did a commentary on Hanukkah and giving Hanukkah gelt. Hanukkah gold is a Jewish custom to give real money on this holiday. In the meantime, happy holidays, whatever holiday you happen to be celebrating, and I'll see you guys in a few days.
Hey, butthead, remember that dollar I borrowed to you?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, I need it back.